Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joey Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We're here to recap Week 13 around the SEC, and what a weekend it was.
Crazy.
We had just about everything this weekend, not just in terms of results, but also games were suspended for days on end. Alabama and Georgia didn't play for like a huge swath of the weekend. Auburn and South Carolina series was over before some basically started. So there was a lot going on. So we're going to get to all of that. But before we jump into anything specific, I have to remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan Brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family, available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan Brand, now at Academy. All right, Mark, I've got a little bit of a format here to help us wade through these waters this weekend. So let me see if I can do this in a way that is concise and makes sense. If I were to give you, if you were going to create a pie chart for me, and I were to say, I want the biggest slice of your pie to represent the team that you are most confident gets the furthest in the postseason, whether that's winning the national title, runner-up, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is there any team in the SEC, based on just the craziness week to week we've seen, where like it feels like nothing matters? And I don't mean that existentially. I just mean like in any given weekend, a team gets beat and we have these big existential questions about like, what is this? Are they as good as we thought? What's wrong? And then the next week they're great. And so it just feels like there's very little carryover from week to week. Right.
Agree.
So that's kind of the foundation for this question. Is there any team in the SEC that you would give like a greater than 33% pie piece to, that you, in terms of confidence that they'll be the last team standing?
Oh, of winning the title?
Of just
33,
getting the
probably not. No. I
So,
do
like,
think it's pretty wide open. I think that, to answer your question, the largest piece of that pie chart right now goes to LSU. I was just there this weekend, and I saw Cade Anderson and I saw Anthony Ianson. And if you're going to beat those two guys back to back, good luck, buddy. I mean,
yeah.
they're pitching at an incredibly high level. The offense seems to have found some things. Certainly, they're a lot better at home. I don't think anyone is going to go into Alec Box Stadium and beat them in regionals or supers. So that gets them to Omaha, and you're going to be able to throw those guys, with all the off days for the majority of your innings. Now, I'm not crazy about the bullpen, other than Zach Cowan. He's really good except for one pitch at A&M. He's been phenomenal all year. And I don't, Kason Evans, his pitch count is a problem for me. He's throwing too many. This is 2 weeks in a row where he's not getting deep in games. And maybe, by the time you get to Omaha, that's not a big deal. Right? Maybe he's pitching in relief, or somebody else is piecing that game together if you need it. But I have the most confidence in them right now. However, heading into the weekend, I might have said Arkansas, the other team I saw this weekend. And the thing about Arkansas, and I wrote this in my takeaways piece for after the Saturday game, is that, we talked about it last week. When they're at their best, I don't know that anybody beats them. They're just not at their best enough. And I do think you look at all that talent, you look at the lineup, you look at how you can't pitch to that team unless you have an Anderson or Ianson. And they've got depth. They've got pieces they can mix and match. On the mound, they've got all this arm talent. It's just, they've got everything you want. They've got a great coaching staff. They have everything you want. Great home venue. Fan base is electric. Everything you want. And I just wonder why they aren't winning more series than they are. I know this league is cutthroat, but this is if they're not the most talented, they sure look like it. I mean, that's a really good roster, and I'm just wondering if there's something missing, and maybe they find it. I mean, there's still time, but that to me is they just kind of titillate you, right? You see the prospects for them, and you wonder why it's not just a little bit more refined than what it is.
No, I think that's well put. And I would, in the big picture, I would agree. At this point, I'd probably give about equal size pie pieces to LSU and Arkansas, because I just can't. No matter what the results are, I just don't think I can quit Arkansas from the standpoint of when they're good, their balance is incredible, and they can win really any type of game. So that's probably where I go there. And so should be said, LSU wins 2 of 3 this weekend. Arkansas salvage it for those who didn't see the results. So, I on form, I go Arkansas. On who would you want just on a neutral field? It's probably still Arkansas for me. And it's for different. It balances a little bit. So like I like Kate Anderson and Anthony Ianson as the 1-2. I think that's such a cheat code when you're talking postseason, because 2 guys, if they're really good, and they are, you don't need much more than that, because two guys will keep you in the winners on the good side of the bracket pretty much all the way through.
Right.
And in the super, it'll just win you the thing. But I certainly like Arkansas's offense better. Just pound for pound. I like Arkansas's bullpen better. But I also, there's the Alec Box factor. Not that Baum's not a tough place to play. Obviously it is, but there's just something about Alec Box where I just have, to your point, like you just feel like you can go ahead and pencil in LSU to get through, all the way through to Omaha from home.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's beating them there that they're going to see in a regional. And depending on the draw, I don't think, unless you just have a phenomenal pitching staff, just to come in and just shut them down and you beat them 3-2, something like that. I don't see a path. I mean, they're just so good at home. They make the plays. They feed off the fans, especially as the later it gets, the better they play. It's a factor, I'll call it. Where a lot of places, it's nice to play at home, but I don't know that it really changes the outcome in the way that it does there.
All right, so let's, starting from there, who would you give? So would Arkansas be the team you'd give the second biggest pie piece to?
It would.
Yeah. So who is third on your list?
Probably Texas. Texas. I liked them a lot more before Spencer got hurt, but they're still a really good team. I feel like they just got hit in the mouth. Okay, so 2 weeks in a row, everybody goes through it. In this league, you're not going to coast. Maybe you can somewhere else. You're not here, and they got thumped, and they've lost 5 out of 6 games. But I do think there's enough talent there. It's an older position group. There's pitchers on the mound who, I mean, you got Belantis at the end of the game, and I mean they've got guys that are really, difference makers. I do feel like that's a team that can win a lot of games. The other one I would mention would be the team they faced this weekend, and that's not something I would have said a few weeks ago. Florida looks legit, dude. I mean, for me, they are definitely one of the top 16 teams in the country. They don't have a top 16 resume, but the way that they're playing right now, they might be better than that. I mean, they figured it out. And, as we talked about it, Sully just has this knack. Regardless of how bad things get, he's able to work through it and move the right chess pieces in the right place so that the moves all work out. And that's where he is right now. And honestly, if Liam Peterson, if he's able to finish his start on the rain game on Saturday, he went 4 innings, rains came. He couldn't bring him back out. They go to the bullpen, and Texas just clobbers them from that point. If you're Florida, you got to be thinking, if he's able to give you 7, do they sweep Texas? And of course, if you're Texas, you don't want to hear that. But I do think that it's something to talk about. And that just goes to show you how good they're playing right now. And I don't know that this is going to continue, but boy, are they scary. And, this was a team preseason that we all loved. We thought was a top 10 team. And now they're reaching that, that preseason prognostication. I feel like those for me would be next. And I don't want to ruin your game here, but then the next team after that is probably Vanderbilt. I've been really impressed with how they've improved offensively as the years gone on. I did not have them as, a top 5 SEC team. They were that next tier. It was all jumbled together with all those other teams. But right now they're playing great, man. They went into Knoxville in a really hostile environment with all the chirping back and forth, and they didn't blink. And they won, a tight game on Sunday. It was, and Fennell didn't go deep. I thought if they were going to win today, it was because he was just really good and he wasn't bad, but he didn't go deep. And they won it with offense, and they won it with clutch pitching late. And McIlvain at the end was what you want. Maybe without all the base runners, but certainly got it done at the end. I mean, that's a team that their ceiling is higher than what I thought, and that's a club. We always love their pitching, but they're hitting more, and they're able to manufacture runs. And I'm not just talking about all the stolen bases on Saturday, but they're just aggressive and then put pressure on you, and they're going. If you're going to beat them, you're going to have to play your A game. Your B game's not going to be good enough.
Yeah, I'm with you on Vanderbilt. I am week by week getting increasingly bullish on Vanderbilt and their postseason hopes. I think the pitching is obviously a strength, and I think Ethan McIlvain pitching well is huge. Like he's just so talented that you needed to continue to get him time to try to get it sorted out. And it's one weekend, but it looked really good. And so that's huge.
We talk about it all the time. You have an arm like that, he's got to have a role. Okay. Yeah. And hopefully it's a big role, but he's at least got to be part of it, because if it ever clicks, you've really got a weapon, and it looks like it's heading that direction.
And quickly on Florida, them playing this well is in some ways just kind of inconceivable. Like they just don't have any right to be playing this well, right? Like Aiden King pitched great today as we record this Sunday, but we realized, okay, he's a freshman, and there were points last year where Liam Peterson pitched great, but on balance, he wasn't consistent. So we know what being a freshman in the rotation is like. But so just generally, though, they have one starter they really trust, and that's kind of it. They have one reliever they really trust, in Jake Clemente, and that's kind of it. And they have 10 healthy position players. And no Colby Shelton, and you've got some guys who are really slumping, and have throughout a lot of SEC play, and yet they're the hottest team in the league, and have been for 6 weeks now. So it boggles the mind. And then on the Texas side of that equation, I would just say, in the same way that Florida could say, hey, if Liam Peterson had finished that start and not had the rain come, I think Texas could. It's a little different, but they could just easily say the entire difference for us this weekend was that Ruger Riojas didn't pitch well. If he gets off to got one out and
that was the game. Yeah, that was the game. Right.
So, if that start goes any differently, Texas has a shot in game one as well. So they could just as easily say we were right there. So I'm not overly worried about that. I just think some of this is the chickens coming home to roost a little bit with the injury stuff that Texas dealt with. For a while, they were doing what Florida's doing, which is you were looking at them and going, I'm not sure how they're doing this, but they are. And finally that just kind of seemed to run out. And they're still battling, and I still like their team, as you mentioned. But so that's that part. Let's talk about Tennessee, though, Mark. You talked about the Vanderbilt side of it. They've got real problems. Like it's the team I loved when I saw them in person, and it has not held together ever since then. And
Yeah.
they've got the stolen base issue is one thing, and it's particularly acute when Marcus Phillips is on the mound, and Tony Vitello was pretty direct about that in post game. I saw the quotes after the game, their beat guys transcribed, and it's kind of like, hey, Marcus Phillips is going to have to get better at that, or he's not going to be.
We can't put him out there. His cost.
Right. I mean, it's literally every base runner. It's like an extra base hit, and you just can't play that way. But it's not just that. It's like they're trying to build the entire bullpen out of Nate Snead at this point too. I mean, it was pretty telling in the Saturday game that they got caught in this cycle where they were just cycling through everybody they had in the bullpen to try to find the right guy. And there's some guys that stuff wise, like Tanner Franklin, he comes in there throwing darts and you're like at 99 or whatever. And you're like, okay, but he's had his share of struggles. Dylan Moy has moments, but other times not. That the freshman that there was a lot of excitement about early in the season with Kuhns and Krenzel, that has not held up quite as well as they would have liked. And so and on top of it, like we said, the offense is just not as scary as it's been, but that's true of a lot of lineups in the league. So I'm not even really holding that against him so much as I am just that basically, unless Liam Doyle's on the mound, it's real dicey for different reasons. Marcus Phillips pitches fine. Like that's really not a problem. Right. It's the base running part. So, but that is a real issue. And on the broadcast on Saturday, I mentioned this on Waypoints this morning, but Tom Hart asked KP, like, when does this become a problem for Tennessee? And KP almost kind of like scoffed and was like, it is now. Like,
it's already
kind of like, what are we talking about? Like, are you watching this? And I know he doesn't mean, like, Tom Hart obviously knows what he's talking. Like, he was just playing the role of like,
setting him up.
Right, in that conversation. But just KP's response made me laugh, where he was just like, are you watching? Like, it is a big problem this very minute.
It's been a problem for a few weeks now, since people kind of realized that this was a thing you could do.
Right, which is so funny that it took that long to. Everybody owns a stopwatch. You can time Marcus Phillips to the plate, but it took a while.
I guess fortunately for him, he wasn't allowing many runners. He was just so good, and now, as you mentioned, someone gets on base, it's a double and potentially a triple, depending on who's running. I think just the whole Tennessee aura, right, that they had in that ballpark. I was up there for their SEC opener against Florida, and that place was rocking. I didn't see how anybody was going to come in that place and win. I even wrote something stupid that, I looked at their schedule and I thought, there's a chance they might go undefeated at home because of how well they play it in Lindsey Nelson. And they did not win another home series after I wrote that. So maybe that's not my fault. Maybe they should share some of that blame, but I do feel a little bit culpable for what's going on. I do think, though, for them to get away from Knoxville, they go to Fayetteville, hostile environment. Tennessee loves the us against the world stuff. I feel like, there's an opportunity for them. I mean, Arkansas, other than the Texas series where they were amazing, hasn't really played that great in the second half of the conference season. Maybe you can go in there and get right. Go to Hoover. They played well in Hoover in the past. They need to get away, and maybe a road regional is not the worst thing for them. They're still in the mix to host, but they might not, depending on how things finish with them and others around the country. Maybe they need to go somewhere else and just kind of embrace the whole get away from home and galvanize and work together. But then they also have to get some outs from the bullpen, and that's that's a whole nother issue. I do feel like offensively they're good enough. I just feel like, and obviously with Doyle and Phillips, when the bases are empty, he's really good too. Yeah, and AJ Russell was better in his outing in the game they won. No, I guess that was the first game they lost on Saturday. He pitched, so I do feel like they've got pieces. They've just got to get it all moving in the right direction and have some success. And I think if they can have some success and build on it, that's the kind of thing that this program is, once they get some momentum, that's a hard thing to deal with, and they just don't have it right now.
Yeah, that's well said. It became a little more clear to me. Like, I got asked a lot on radio and what have you the last couple of weeks of what's wrong with Tennessee. And my answer was, it's a few things that are all, nothing is like cataclysmically wrong here, but it's just a bunch of little things. And I still think that's mostly true, but I do think this weekend did bring some things into like sharper focus for me of some of the biggest issues. Right. And I think that's, the bullpen and just being able to stop teams from running all over them. And it's not just Marcus Phillips. I mean, it's because it ends up being a little bit of a contagious thing where base runners start to get, confident, and Tennessee starts to, it starts to become a mental thing, and it's a whole thing. Real quick, we'll get to the rest of the action here, including maybe the biggest upset series sweep that I have ever seen at the Power Conference level. We will get to that in just a second, but first, a word for our other sponsor here at Highway to Hoover, and that's Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, just like yours truly, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas Boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. Mark, what happened in College Station?
I mean, it's the A&M team that we saw early in conference play.
Precisely. I said that this morning. It on Waypoints. That was like a carbon copy of a series from mid-April.
Yeah,
for A&M.
It's like the last month never happened.
Yeah.
6 weeks, however long it's been, never happened. They were right back to where they were, and they had been. I mean, they just took a series from LSU, who might be the number one team in the nation now. That was their last time out before Missouri just came in and shellacked them 3 times. And the part, so Friday, A&M blew a 3-run lead in the ninth, gave up 6 unanswered, and that was the big shocker. And it's like that beat them the rest of the weekend because they did not. They had they got 2 hit. Was it both games they got 2 hit? The rest of the series, give Missouri all the credit in the world. They came in, got some guys back from injury. Sam Horn was amazing. Tony Newback was the best he's been since he's come back. Ian Losey came in and pitched well. Then the guys today, was it Libert and was it McDevitt?
Yeah, Will Libert.
Yeah,
Libert and McDevitt.
Yeah. They were great. And if you're Missouri, you got to be thinking, if we'd have had these guys healthy all year, certainly they'd have been better, but maybe they're a normal Missouri team and they're in the hunt for a regional right now. But, that wasn't what happened. But back to your A&M point, we were all thinking this is a no doubt regional team now. Certainly they're going to thump Missouri 3 times. And then they're going to go into Georgia, and they may beat Georgia too, the way they're playing, because they've already won at Tennessee. They've won at Arkansas. They beat LSU at home. They've having all this success. They have figured it out. And then this happens, and we're all left. And I'm sure they are too. What in the hell just happened? This is inexplainable. And we talked about this on our group chat. Is this the biggest upset any of us can think of? Because laying out the facts, you had a team 0-24 who just knocked off the preseason number 1, who, they've had their hiccups, but had been playing really well over the last 5 weeks or so, and who needs it to make a regional. And not only does Missouri win 1 game, they just clean sweep and really, today they were flirting with a run rule. It was just a total annihilation on Sunday. If you're A&M, it will be fascinating to see what A&M does when they go to Georgia next week, because Georgia's they're ticked off too, because they lost a series today. That lost 2 games on Sunday. I feel like, and they played really well at Foley Field, so that's going to be one of those things where A&M has got to come in like Florida did last year. Remember Florida's deal where they were flirting with the over 500 record. They had to win the series, and they were able to do it. That's what A&M has to do. And of course, Georgia's thinking, why do we have to play this role where somebody's coming in to try to save their season against us? But that's what's shaping up, and that becomes. It was already going to be a fascinating series. Now it's like watching. Are you watching a train wreck, or are you watching a boxing match? Because somebody's going to get hurt either way, and I wonder if A&M coming in, if they can find whatever it was that they found earlier in Knoxville and make one last rise, then they make this thing interesting. Their RPI is 59. That's a problem. But they've got great wins. If they beat the Georgia's, number 1, number 2, something like that in the RPI. If you go in and you win there, you win 2 out of 3, then you've at least going into Hoover with a puncher's chance. And that will make it interesting for folks like us who like to talk about that stuff. But I do think that there's a chance that they just continue this swoon and Georgia just continues to do this number. And then I'm really concerned for the direction of that program at that point. Because when you think about all the preseason expectations, and if they're not even, if they go into Hoover without a puncher's chance, they've got to win the automatic or else, then that's concerning. And it's one of those things that it may be hard to come back from. Now for Missouri, now you're starting to believe, because show what we can do. You have Mississippi State coming in. They need wins to secure their at-large hopes. Missouri just wrecked A&M season. They would love nothing more to take another one with them and take Mississippi State's as well. So now that becomes a really fascinating series next week. 2 of probably the spotlight series, so to speak, are going to be teams that might not even make the postseason, with Missouri and A&M. I feel like, this weirdness that happened in College Station has really shifted the focus from the big series into something, I guess, maybe just a little more compelling at the bottom of the field.
Yeah, I mean, two top 10 teams, like, oh, that's interesting, but okay, you're
yeah.
you're gonna be playing at home in June, and but yeah,
Right.
Some of these series that are a little bit further down the standings, I think, are more compelling in some ways. Obviously, for it's a zero. Baseball's a zero-sum game, as all sports are. But you feel, as much as you, I guess, you feel for A&M a little bit, just because they were the team that they gave Missouri the first win. But yeah, from the Missouri side, like, once they won the last couple of games that series, for me, it kind of just shifted to, like, good for Missouri, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they didn't just squeak out a win that somebody handed to them. And I don't even really think that's what happened on Friday. I mean, yes, A&M, gave away some free bases and made a crucial error and all that stuff. But Missouri also hit its way to that.
Right.
So I'm glad it wasn't just kind of like a game where one team, metaphorically speaking, slipped on a banana peel and
Right.
Missouri slipped past them. So, I mean, good for them, because it'd be easy to be kind of just totally disconnected from it after the season they've had. And they are tricky. They'll have Mississippi State next weekend, and as you mentioned, and maybe that's a good segue to talk about the Egg Bowl series. But if you're Mississippi State, like, suddenly you're just I think it was always going to be anxiety inducing. Just
Right.
Even an 0-27 Missouri was going to be anxiety inducing, because there was just that added pressure of, oh boy, are they going to come in here and spoil our season for their only win? Now it's a different anxiety, because that's not on the table. But now, I mean, sure, A&M didn't play well, but also that looked like a competent baseball team out there for Missouri. Like, they got pitchers back. They're healthy. Like you mentioned, Horn and Newbeck and Losi. Those are three credible SEC level pitchers that pitch well and can get anybody out. They had some other guys step up this weekend. They're swinging the bats better. Jackson Lovich looks like a superstar, you know? So yeah, if you're Mississippi State, it's like, well, okay, well now it's not just like, oh, this plucky team is going to try to come in here and get itself a win to feel good about itself. Like, now they just might outplay them, right? Like that's on the table. So, but State is coming off of winning 2 out of 3 against Ole Miss. I knew it was going to be a tough series between these two. State ultimately gets it done on Saturday, finishes that series off. The story for me, Mark, was Evan Sierry.
Yeah.
With his start. Talk about out of nowhere. I had talked, funny enough, like I had kind of talked a similar way about Riley Maddox a couple weeks ago, and he had another good start this weekend, but just a performance that nothing that had happened before seemed to suggest that was in the cards. And that was certainly the case with Evan Sierry. It's a 15 strikeout performance. The first time any State pitcher had struck out 15 since Will Bednar in the 2021 College World Series against Texas. Funny enough. Out of nowhere, like Evan Sierry's like a bulldog pitch to contact guy. Right. And he's out there just mowing down Ole Miss. Kudos to him, man. Like that's a performance he'll remember for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And I did not see it coming.
Yeah. And, I was thinking about that is because I guess that was Saturday night. So I had just finished in Baton Rouge and was coming back. So I got to watch the last, 3-4 innings of that at the hotel. And I was thinking about how special it must be for that kid who grew up in Starkville, who's been at Mississippi State his whole career, not one of these, not one of the transfer guys who was somewhere else in his command. He's been part of this rivalry. Mississippi State, I mean, that was a must win for them. They lost the opener. They had to have this victory. And he came out and shoved for 8 innings and struck out 15 and held them. Didn't give up many hits, and I think it was scoreless, right, for 8 innings. I mean, it was just he did his part, right, and carved his name, because the people that are there are going to remember him forever, because that was just such a big moment for the program that really needed something like that to happen. And now you look at where Mississippi State is. They swept Kentucky last weekend. They took 2 out of 3 from Ole Miss. They won 5 out of the last 6 in the conference. They go to Missouri, and Missouri's now formidable, apparently, but that's still a winnable series for them if they play well. They still have more talent than Missouri, and if they go in and they play as well as they can, they're going to make a regional. And when Chris Lemonis was fired, just a short time ago, we weren't real sure how this was going to play out. Certainly the schedule's set up with all the home games, but they still had to go out and win, and they have. So it's one of those moments, in sports where I think the team is kind of galvanized when something happened. They all love Lemonis, or at least a lot of them did, I'm sure. And you feel guilty when your coach, goes through that, and somebody you deal with every day and he's no longer there, and you got to pick up the pieces. And I feel really, I guess, impressed with how they've handled this, and happy that this has transpired. If you're Ole Miss, you probably had to win this series to have any hosting chances. I think now you've got to play a red hot Auburn team, and maybe you sweep them and you get back into it. But, from a realistic standpoint, you're probably looking at a 2 seed. And to be honest, before the year started, you would have taken that. Okay. After the last couple of years, Mike Bianco coaching for his job, and went out and brought in a bunch of older guys to help with that returning crew that they had coming back. And it's worked out. I feel like this has been a successful step forward for them, laid the foundation for whatever's next. And they're going to be a challenging team for somebody to deal with in a regional because they're older, they know how to play, and they've got some thump in the lineup. So depending on the draw, I mean, they could, they could be a team that could come out of a regional. So even though you're disappointed you lose to your rival, there's still plenty to play for. You just need to kind of get some things cleaned up next week against Auburn, and then the following, however many games you play in Hoover, so that when you get into regional play, everything is buttoned up and you're ready to go.
They might be the SEC team for me, Ole Miss I'm talking about, that has the smallest distance between its floor and its ceiling of any team in the league, because they, that all senior rotation gives them a pretty high floor.
Yeah.
But also none of the three have been like, even Hunter Elliott, like he's having a nice year, but he's not the guy, he's not performed like the guy that was lights out in the postseason back in 2022.
Right.
So, and that's fine. Like, that was a high standard to live up to. Nobody said he was going to get back to that necessarily, but, but that rotation's good, but not great. The offense is good, but not great. And, and they've got some guys in the bullpen, that they trust, but it's not the deepest pin out there. But it's just, but because they're old, they're not going to be the team that kind of like, I was going to use a vulgar term, but they're not going to be a team that freaks out there, on the field in a regional. But they're also, I'm not really sure what they hang their hat on to make a deep postseason run, right? And all it takes is 5 wins to end up in Omaha once you're in the postseason. So anybody can do it, but I struggle to necessarily see the ceiling there. But the flip side is I have a lot of conviction that this team's going to get into a regional, whether they're playing at home or whether they're a 2 seed. They're going to get into a regional and they're going to end up playing on Sunday in that regional, at a bare minimum.
I agree.
Let's move on to what do you say we do Bama and Georgia?
Yeah.
And to me, this is the series that most typifies what I talked about, where nothing matters, because like Georgia is, are they still? Yes, they're still number 1 in RPI. We had them ranked 6 going into the weekend. There's a lot of things to like about their team, but they've also had a lot of series like this one where they go on the road and they just get beat like relatively routinely, right? I mean, they won a blowout game in the first game of the series, but the last 2 games,
7 home runs. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And that shows how they're dangerous for sure. But then the next two games, which in fairness, they had a suspension from Friday all the way to Sunday. Alabama wins the resumption of that game and the third game of the series, but it was just kind of routine for Alabama. And then the flip side for Alabama, they're kind of the same thing. They don't have Georgia's upside for me. They don't have the same level of stuff on the mound. Their lineup's not as good. There's a lot of reasons, but they've kind of done this same thing where it's like, but on a grander scale, where there's been times where I've kind of started to, kind of walk away from Alabama a little bit and say, I just don't necessarily see it. And every time I start to do that, they have a weekend like this where they beat a top 10 team, and now suddenly, they're one really good weekend away from maybe also playing at home. Right? Like the RPI is good enough. It's just going to be a matter of if they do enough in the league and finish strong. But so I don't know where that leads the conversation. That's not really ending the question. But to me, it's just like the most nothing means anything in terms of momentum in this league. It was the series that most typified that for me.
Yeah. Let's start with Georgia. I think Rylan Zabransky did not play. So having him I guess the final game was really close. Maybe that makes a difference, right? I think they're a team that, while they have a ton of stuff, they didn't get very deep starts. And I do feel like, I think Finley pitched into the 4th today. Colton Smith didn't go very long. I don't even think he pitched an inning in game 2. Uh, they just need more. Those are really talented pitchers. I feel like there's more in the tank there that's got to come out in order for them to get where they want to be, and that shortens what all those guys that they're using in the bullpen have to do. For Alabama, Justin LeBron had been really struggling the second half of SEC play, and he homered in Game 2 and had 3 hits in Game 3. And he's that transcendent player that can elevate everyone around him and turn Alabama into just this meh, okay team into something that can be pretty special. And I feel like it's a lot to put on his shoulders, but I mean, when you're that talented, it kind of comes with the gig, right? So I feel like if he's really figuring it out down the stretch, then that changes the math on them. It makes them somebody. Well, it gives them, because Cade Snell is really good hitting behind him. He's hitting almost 400 in SEC play. So you got those two guys in the middle of your lineup that you really can't pitch to, and everybody else is getting better pitches, right? So I think that's the key. And then Carson Osmer saved 2 games on Sunday. He's the guy who blew their game against Vandy. They led 7-2 with 2 outs in the 8th and got beat. That's really the only hiccup he's had all year. If he's right, he gives them a difference maker at the end of the game that a lot of teams wish they had. And I feel like if they can get the game to him with a lead, odds are they're in great shape. So I think that's going to be the key for them going forward. Is their starting pitching was okay. I mean, Tyler Fay, even in the game they got blown out, he was pitching great, and then it kind of fell apart, and then the bullpen came in and threw gasoline everywhere. So I feel like they've got to go to Florida next week, and that is going to be fascinating because Florida's playing so great. Alabama's not playing bad either. So I do feel like Alabama's RPI is 8, and Florida's all the way up in the teens too. If Florida were to have a great series, they could go into Hoover and have an outside shot to host if they make a run. Meanwhile, if Alabama goes down to Florida and wins that series after beating Georgia this weekend, they're going to host because they have a top 10 RPI. They'll give them 17 wins. So it's there for them as well. And even if they only win 1, they're in the conversation depending on what else happens around the rest of the country. So that's another fascinating, final weekend that we'll have to monitor because it's going to have ramifications over the whole bracket.
Their resume reminds me a little bit of Kentucky's hosting resume 2 years ago, not last year when they were, a number 2.
They were great. Yeah.
But 2 years ago when I think they only won 4 series all season in the SEC.
Yeah.
But they perfectly executed a schedule, not just in the making of the schedule, but how it played out, where they never got swept.
Mm-hmm.
Their RPI had their RPI was always better than what most people thought their team was.
Yeah.
And then they won enough series to get the job done. That feels a little bit like, because right now Bama's sitting on 4 SEC series wins.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost a series to Vanderbilt but didn't get swept, lost a series to LSU but didn't get swept, lost a series to Mississippi State but didn't get swept, lost a series to Auburn and didn't get swept, lost a series to Tennessee and didn't get swept. So they, and if they win 1 against Florida, that'll finish 16-14, probably with an RPI that's not too different from what it is right now. And that feels almost exactly like what Kentucky was 2 years ago, although Kentucky, if I remember correctly, started hotter in conference play. So they kind of started up here and then kind of just slowly.
And then the schedule changed, yeah.
Right. So, and they just did enough at the end to kind of stay in that range, whereas Alabama's been a little more up and down. But it does feel similar to me in terms of that, where it's like maybe they don't need to win the Florida series to host, on 16 high RPI, all that stuff.
You just wouldn't control your own destiny.
Correct.
Because,
Yes.
you know, somebody else could just come take it from you. I do think that winning the series against Georgia, that was their best series of the win of the year.
Oh, yes.
And so that at least keeps them in the running for it, and that's all you want. You want to go into these last couple of weeks with a chance, and they certainly are there.
Speaking of Kentucky, they sweep Oklahoma, and boy, did they need that.
Yeah.
You know, they got swept by State last weekend, and I don't think we saw that coming, right? We thought, okay, they very well might lose that series, but they'll get a game. Well, they didn't. And then this series was like, okay, probably just pick Kentucky as the home team, but they probably won't sweep it, and they did. So it all kind of ends up washing out. But that got them where they need to go. They're 13-14 in the conference. You feel pretty good about where they're at, just from the standpoint of now they're guaranteed to be in the discussion, right? The 13 wins gets them firmly in the discussion. And then if you can do something against Vanderbilt this weekend in Nashville, which is not, or this coming weekend, which is not a gimme, but you do anything there, you win a game, and you feel like, okay, we've probably done enough. So just,
and you win two, you might be a 2 seed. That's how narrow this is.
Yeah. Exactly, 100%. Yeah, and they played like a different. I got to give them a lot of credit, because it wasn't just me saying this. Like Runes, who saw them play against Mississippi State 2 weekends ago, said they kind of feel out of gas. Like, and it made some sense. Every game they're in seems like a one-run game. So like every game has been stressful. They've had very few blowouts on either end, winning or losing. And they dealt with some injuries, and some guys just were fading, and they really kind of turned the tide this weekend, because it was, yes, the opening game was particularly close. It was 4-3, but you beat Kyson Witherspoon, so you'll take it however you get it. But the next 2 days, they more or less just, was pretty routine,
controlled it.
Honestly. Yeah, like it never felt, the last 2 days, it never really felt at any point like Oklahoma was in the driver's seat at any point over the last 2 days. And that's a credit to Kentucky, which it looks like it's headed for its third straight regional, and that's the first time that's ever happened for the program. So kudos to them. And on the Oklahoma side, like, you're still fine for regional, like your case is basically the exact same as what Kentucky's is. It's very, very similar overall resumes, but obviously going into a series against, is it Texas this weekend for Oklahoma?
It is at home.
Yeah. Going into that series, they're in a similar spot where it's like, okay, it's at home, so they have that advantage going for them. But, you're just like, hey, get a game, and then the rest is kind of gravy. But you want to go into the postseason on a better note, I would say, for Oklahoma.
Yeah. We said after Kentucky got swept that they had work to do, and that they really had to split these last 6 games. They needed 3. And I guess Minge just isn't real patient.
Yeah,
he
they
went
put
ahead
in
and got his 3.
They didn't just put in work. They stayed overtime.
Yeah. He went ahead and got it. And I think they're in. Even if they get swept in Nashville, I still think they're in. Obviously, you don't want that. You'd like to at least get one, and then you're not sweating on Memorial Day. But I do feel like Kentucky did what they had to. With Oklahoma, they've been one of these teams that have wide swings. Some games I watch them and I think, oh, this team with the right draw, they could go on a run and win a regional, win a super. And then other times I watch them and I'm less than impressed. And I think a lot has to do with how good they are, on the mound that day, from how good a start they get after Kyson. He's been really consistent. But the other two, with Crossland and with Malachi, they've had days where they're just superb, and then days where it's just not there. And while that's kind of normal for this league, that a lot of teams do that, but when you're talking about a top 20, top 25 kind of team where Oklahoma sees itself, and potentially higher than that, you just need more consistency out of that spot, and they didn't get it this weekend. I do feel like the offense, the way that they have a good understanding of the strike zone, They put pressure on you defensively. If they get the right draw, they could wreck somebody's season. It's just a question of I do feel like they're a bit vulnerable if they get somebody who really handles their style of play. Which Kentucky plays that style in practice, so they're really in tune with it. So it was kind of like the Spider-Man meme with them looking at each other, and Kentucky just did it better at home.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. With Oklahoma, I think some of their season to me has felt a little like they did enough early in the season that as they've kind of leveled out in SEC play, it's taken us a while to come around to understanding who they really are, right?
Yeah.
Which is they're a good, solid team that's going to the postseason. But there for a while, we were starting to maybe dream about something a little bit bigger and in fairness to them, they were coming off of they beat Oregon State and Virginia in Round Rock, and those two teams were in the top 5 or whatever. And, those Oregon State is still mostly there, but Virginia struggled. So,
and at that point they had Cam Johnson, who looked like he was going to be a real thing. And if he was still there, still pitching the way he was then with Crossland the way he's pitching, and Malachi and Kyson, I mean, that changes what changes the ceiling for that team, and it just it just didn't follow that same trend that it was early in the year.
I'm kind of intrigued to see what Kentucky does in the postseason, because I think McKay and Cleaver are good enough. I mean, it's not Anderson, Ianson, but what is, right? But those two guys are good enough to where, especially if they're able to, I guess as a 2, it's a little bit risky. I was going to say if you don't use Cleaver in game 1, which I guess they probably won't because he's been pitching Sundays.
Well, it depends on your draw, righty, lefty, if you draw a team with a lot of lefties, maybe you go Cleaver, but if it's just a normal lineup, maybe you throw, you throw McKay or even, you just kind of figure it out as you go. And because I do think that there's not that much drop off between any of the 3. They're all, have their days where they're really good. And I feel like, that's a team that, if they're playing their best, they're going to be in every game. And then it's just a question of who makes the play down the stretch. And they're so accustomed to playing all these close games, like you mentioned before, that they're battle tested. And I feel like that's going to be a huge advantage for them as they go forward, unless they get blitzed by somebody, which is, that can happen to anyone. But if it's close, Kentucky they're really comfortable in their skin when, in the 9th inning when it's tied.
They're interesting too. This is a side note that, is not for right now, but other than Cole Hage, you could argue at least recently the 2 best hitters in their lineup have been Tyler Bell and Ryan Schwartz. And what do those 2 guys have in common?
Yeah.
Freshmen.
So shave. Yeah.
Right. So, we've talked about the Auburn stock for 2026 with those freshmen coming back. Kentucky's not quite on that level in terms of anticipation of what the freshmen are about, but between those 2 and you'll get Cleaver back and Nate Harris is back. Kentucky might be a team that actually is worth maybe buying some stock in as we head to 2026, given that young talent. All right, last series, and it was one that finished, about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Auburn sweeps South Carolina. A weird series where Auburn beats the brakes off South Carolina on Thursday. They should have had an NC-17 rating on it. Just
ugly,
not suitable for children. And then in game 2 of the series, South Carolina comes out with a ton of fight. Ultimately comes up short, but it was 11-10, something like that.
Auburn won it on a squeeze.
Right, yeah, of all things. And then they finish off the sweep, but just a really bizarre series for Auburn. But in the big picture, the train rolls on for Auburn I always hate to use, as I'm sure you do, hate to use terms like lock, but like with the way they're playing and with their overall resume, the number 2 RPI, like hosting seems like a lock at this point.
Yeah.
And if you get anything done this last week against Ole Miss on the road, you feel pretty good that Auburn might be able to play at home first 2 weekends in June, which is something that, I mean, to their credit, I'd have to go back year by year and remember, but in any of their recent Omaha runs under Butch, have they played at home in supers? Like, I don't recall that they have. I could be wrong, but I'm sure.
I could go look, but yeah.
I'm sure Lindsey Crosby will send us an email if after the fact if we're wrong about that. But yeah, so I mean, they're in the mix for that kind of stuff. Like, it's just the last couple of weeks, they've really done a lot to bolster that resume. And then on the South Carolina side, it's just one more step in the wrong direction, for lack of, you know, I'm not sure if this is rock bottom or if there's still some bottom to find for South Carolina, but kudos for showing some fight, I suppose, but it just, another sweep. And now there's kind of this parlor game, I guess I'm playing in my head, of which team ends up with more SEC wins, Mizzou or South Carolina, because now like I think the smart money's still on South Carolina, but a push seems pretty reasonable as well, with South Carolina still sitting on 5. So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I guess with Auburn, they play so well at home, and certainly towards the end of the year, I mean, they went Tennessee and won. They played better on the road, and they're pitching better. Obviously the offense is rolling. I mean, this is a team that, I mean, they look like an Omaha team right now. And I feel like, people have asked me, who's your 8 for Omaha? How many SEC teams are going to go? You get that question, 38 times a week. I do feel like Auburn is a team that maybe a few weeks ago I would they're more of a sleeper. And now they're moving into, okay, I think they really have a legitimate shot to get there. I really like the makeup of that team and how they've come together and improved, and how they have depth, both positionally and on the mound. It's a good looking club. With South Carolina, man, I mean, that Thursday night you mentioned, it was not for the meek. It was, and that was the second one of those they'd had in a couple of games, because Florida did that to them as well. And then they come back out and you think, well, they've quit. They've mailed it in. They're ready to go to summer ball, ready to hit the portal, whatever's next. Sell insurance, anything but play baseball. And they came out and they played their hearts out. And they came up short, but they really acquitted themselves well. And then, the final game wasn't as competitive, but they at least showed some fight. And I feel like that's what they've got to do the rest of the way, because they've got LSU coming in, and you're going to see Anderson and Ianson, and then a cast of guys throwing, 98 to 100 behind them. And I do feel like, that's probably not going to end well for them, even at home. And what does that mean for South Carolina if you go 5-25? I mean, you went 13-17 last year and fired your coach. So I do feel like it's something that makes you want to introspect and understand where you are as a program. Are we still where we feel we should be as one of the, because you won all the titles and you were perennial regional team and all this good stuff? What has gone wrong for it to fall this far? Is it coaching? Is it resources? Is it talent? Is it what? And where's, to use your pie chart analogy from earlier, how does that divide up? and where do we want to put our emphasis. And I do feel like that's when Missouri's got to do that this weekend, withstanding, they've still got to do that. And South Carolina's got to do that too, and understand where can we get better. Because this has been unacceptable how this season has gone, and I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. So how do you fix it? And you move on, and you turn the page, and you forget this ever happened, because it's been troubling. And they've got 3 more of those, and then they go to Hoover, and and then in today's tournament, where a team like a Missouri or South Carolina, you've got to win 5 straight games to get the automatic. At least in the other world, you could win 1 to play in, and then you could lose a game and still keep going. It's really going to be challenging for those teams to make a run, and you're kind of playing out your string kind of this weekend to do it, which at this point maybe it's a mercy killing, right? You're just ready to be done and move on and see what's next.
Yeah, it's certainly, we've said this a bunch of times this season, but it bears repeating. It's just going to be an off season of like really hard look in the mirror for South Carolina, because some of the things that have gone wrong are fixable, like in the immediate term, and some are longer term things that aren't necessarily fixable in one off season. So right. They're just going to have to take a long hard look at that. And on that chipper note, that'll do it for this episode. Quick programming note. So we've discussed, we will have a live streamed SEC tournament preview show on Monday evening. Time TBD, just kind of depends on if my flight's on time and when I get to my hotel, get set up, all that stuff. I promise I will communicate more specific timing information once I'm able to actually do that. But I can guarantee it'll be that evening. Relatedly, we will not have a typical recap episode. So this type of episode you're listening to right now, we will not have one of those next Sunday. Instead, the tournament preview show is the replacement for that. There's just no reason really to do, shows on back-to-back days like that. So especially this time of year, because frankly, Mark and I both have just, too much to do at this time of year. And Mark has real responsibilities like children and a day job. So, so he's even busier. So anyway, so no recap show like this one, but you will get the preview live stream on Monday. All right. I want to thank Academy Sports and Outdoors and Tecovas Boots for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. It has been fantastic to have them on board all season. Yeah. A couple of brands that are, that we feel strongly about and that, love to patronize their businesses. And so it seemed like a real seamless fit for us. So thank you again to Academy and Tecovas. Season's obviously not over. They'll still be sponsoring our stuff, but just wanted to make sure as we start to get close to the end of the regular season here that I acknowledge them. Again, thank you as always to Mark for joining me. Thank you, the listeners, for